paint meter is for finding the variance of the thickness between what's conductive and then what we see right here on the top. So the question is, why is the paint thicker on this side than it is on that side? We're trying to find Bondo, we're trying to find really thick paint. So what we'll do is we'll move across this whole entire fender here. So we've got 8, 7, 7.5, 7.5, 7.5. Got a little scratch here. So just kind of look right around there. That's usually just caused by something outside. Looks like, you know, like a little key, like somebody just walked by it with a belt or whatever. We got 8 and 8.5 around here. 7.5, 7, 7, 6.5, and 6.5. So then we just keep on walking down this side of the car, and we're getting 6.5 consistently right here. 6.5, 6.5, 7, 7, 7. We want to 6. We want to go all the way to the edge because that's where they really start thinning paint out, is at the edge. Very, very, very edge. 6.5, 7. We're getting a pretty solid 6.5 to 7.5 across this entire fender. We want to come down here, 6.5, 6.5, 7, 7.5. Some of this dirt here. 7.5, 7.5. So I can tell you that this fender, so this is what's really hard by just going off of a number, right? So this number is a touch higher than what we want to normally see. We want to see between 4 and 6, right? But we're seeing between 6 and 8, right? But we are not seeing a large variance. We're not seeing it go from like 8 here and end at 12 over here. That would definitely, there would be paint on this car. It would be repainted. We're seeing between 6.5 and 8 across the entire fender. Next thing that we want to look at is just by the eye, any sort of blemish in the paint. If somebody did paint this fender, sometimes if it's not in a paint booth, there will be dust particles in the air, and then those dust particles will come down and stick to the paint and cause like a paint blemish. So we want to just go through and look really closely in a fluorescent light, so light in a garage, even an LED light. You don't want to try to do this in the sun. The sun will hide a lot of paint blemish. Your eyes won't be able to pick it up. So we just want to come down here and look very closely for any sort of particle that may have been picked up from a possible paint job on this car. You know, you want to make sure that you look at chips differently. So there's a paint chip there, a paint chip there, and a paint chip there. That is not a paint blemish. That's something that I'm talking about, blemishing a paint when it's coming out of the spray gun and you're spraying it onto the car. It has to lay on the fender perfect. So that I'm looking for an imperfection of the paint going onto. You just have to know the difference between a rock chip and a paint blemish. Here's a very, very small paint blemish. Okay, so right here, you see a little tiny dent that's inside the paint. See how the paint goes down inside this little dent right there? That would be a paint blemish. Porsche was going bankrupt in the 90s. It wasn't until 04 when the Cayenne came out where it like pulled them out of a possible bankruptcy. Fit and finish on these cars, as much as you think they might be perfect, they're not actually the most perfectly put together cars because they didn't have a lot of money to make stuff like this perfect. So the question would be, what happens when I really start looking at the paint and mills around this area? Let's say the front was smashed in and somebody Bondoed it. I could tell you there's no Bondo because Bondo is basically, we can read up to about 24 mils on this meter. After that, there's excessive Bondo. After 15, there's Bondo. So we're getting the same thickness, you know, we're getting between that 7 to 8. I just got 9 down here. I am measuring kind of the curvature also, so. But I'm gonna say that this paint is probably factory. We wanna open the hood and pull back this rubber weather strip. We wanna look for anything that might be suspicious. I'm gonna try to get a paint reading. 3.5, 3, 3. Go right up here on the paint. So we got 8 here and 3 here. The difference in the paint meter reading here could be the lack of color, the lack of primer, or the lack of clear. This section is clear coated. You can see it. You can see how it's not polished, like this corner edge isn't polished. It doesn't have to be because this is nice and smooth right here, but then it gets like real orange peely in there. So what we're gonna do is make sure that this side looks the same. So we're gonna look for the same orange peel amount, which happens down in this corner edge down here. That's all there. And then we'll just shoot this paint right here. Yep. That just said 15. Okay, 4.5, 5, 5, 3.5, 4, 3.5, 4.5, 4, 4, 4.5, 5, 4.5. Right here, we have the same amount of paint right here as we do up here on this side of the fender. Again, I'm looking for paint blemishes even on this side, even though I've got like a good number, like 4.5. There is a paint blemish that could be actually just be something that sat on top of the paint, like water. If we look over here, you can see where the color goes missing way up here, and then color comes back in down here, and then the color goes missing right here, and then the color comes in underneath it. And that's just simply because the way it's screened. So if somebody was holding their paint gun way up high and shooting it down low right here, or they're shooting it up high instead of down low, they're not going to cover this area, right? Which is very normal. We can measure that. We can see that we got 1.5 mils of paint, 2, 2, 2. We have 6.5 here, but there's also this, I just did that on top of a rubberized coating. So if I go 6 there, right next to it's 2. So, you know, not on the rubberized coating, it's 2. That's all 2. So we've got 2 mils on the side through here. So we've looked at both front fenders. That fender, the left fender, has 4 mils on it. This has 7 mils on it by average. So there's a little bit more paint in it. Maybe it has an extra coat of primer on it. Who knows? But we're gonna keep on coming down the doors here. The door measures between 6 and 7.5 all the way across. We get 6 up here, 7 down here. And again, we're looking for the same exact thing that we're looking for in the fender. So we're looking for anywhere that has a high number. I'm finding 8, and these are all 7s right here, going all the way across. 7, 7, 7. Over here, somewhere there was 8, 7.5. 8, 7, 7, 6.5, 6. What's way up here? 6.5, 7, 6, 5.5, 5.5. So I'm seeing between 5.5 to 8 through this door. There's 8 kind of right here in the middle center. Again, I'm going to look for blemishes. I see maybe what could be a paint crack right here. Very, 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 very minor cracking underneath there. You have to really, really look at it. But I'm not seeing any like big variance. And a big variance would be like where you measure 6 on one side of the door and you get 13 on another side of the door, right? That's the car was for sure painted. Between 6 and 8, there's not really a lot to tell there. That's within an acceptable range. The number 6 to 8 isn't the greatest number to start at. You want to see between 4 and 6, but you know, it's not the end of the world. Down here you have 3.5, 4, 5, 4.5, 4.5, and 5. So way up here, you got 5, or if you look down here, you look right here, you got 3.5, and then if you go right next to it, you got 7. So basically, the paint is roughly, you know, twice as thick, or I should say the coatings are twice as thick. The primer, whatever they have underneath here. Then we can go down underneath here. We've got 3, 2.5, 2.5, 2.5. If we go underneath here, there's a rubberized coating down here. So we got 7.5 down here. We got 9, 10.5. Okay, we're not going to use this number as a variance though, because the variance would be there's a rubberized coating on this rock guard, and it's measuring that rubberized coating. So if we're measuring the rubberized coating, it's going to be thicker. I got 13.5 right here. On all these cars, there's that plastic vinyl sticker. So right here on the paint, I got 17.5. Right here, I got 17.5. And right here, I got 4, right? So the mils thick, I got from 18 to 4. So this sticker is 14 mils thick, is what this sticker is. So you can measure, we got 18, 17.5, 17.5, 18, 17.5, 18.5. So we're good there. 4.5, 4.5. So, you know, why is the paint, so, you know, doors can get painted separate of the body. The bottom of the body is 3 right here, and then the top right here is 5.5. So 2.5 to 5.5. So there's twice the amount of paint on the door right here than there is right here. That's fine. The door may have been painted in the factory with the door removed. That's so they can get all the way inside the door jambs and all that. That's pretty standard when they do that. That's the only way they can completely paint the inside of the door jambs. We've got 4, 4.5, 4.5, 5, 4, 4.5, 4.5, 5, 5. So this quarter is between 4 and 5.5. That's good. And then if we come across the rear deck lid, we got 4, 4, 4.5, and 3. So those are all good numbers. Again, I always look for paint blemishes here and there. You can see there's like some sort of blemish underneath here, but that's all right. These cars have blemishes all over. 8, 7.5, 7, 8, 7.5, 7, 6.5. 6, 5.5, 6, 6.5, 7, 6.5, 6.5. I'm seeing some more blemishes in this paint. So you got a blemish right here in the paint. It's almost, you can almost see it looks like a door ding, but it's like a divot in the paint. It's like a spot that got dried out while it was being painted right there. One thing that we're gonna look at here is the paint is not polished right here on this edge underneath this canvas, underneath the rooftop liner. So if we peel that back a little bit, you can see where the polish, it's polished all the way on this edge, all the way down. We can follow it all the way down, right? This car is just a little dirty. It's polished all the way down. But if we come up here, and this is just what a really good pre-purchase inspection on paint entails. Right here, it starts getting unpolished, just right there on that edge. And it follows all the way up around, right to there. So, the question is, was it painted and then masked over and then polished and then they peeled the masking off? Or was it painted and then it had a final buff in the factory, and the final buff they just, I mean, you could imagine, so that the way they get that, all that orange peel off of there, is that actually has to be color sanded a little bit. And I'm looking at the orange peel, I'm not looking at the discoloration from the top chafing against the paint. There are two different things happening here. There's some discoloration, abrading that's happened. And then right next to that, there is some orange peel where the paint wasn't finished all the way. Let's go over to the other side and look at the other side. So right here we have some abrasion, right? That's fine. I mean, this thing's been rubbing against this car for 23 years, right? This is a 98 model, but is there any orange peel that's happening that was never, buffed out? And the answer on this side is no. There is no orange peel on this side. There's definitely some abrading of the paint for sure. I mean, look at all this dirt, just super nasty underneath here. So why is there orange peel, up here on the other side, and this side does not have that same orange peel? At the same time, this side is at 7 to 8. 8 down here, 8.5 down here. So these numbers would suggest possibly a repainting. That orange peel left over right there, just underneath where the top comes down, and then you have orange peel right there. It's where the buffing wheel missed that spot. Could they have missed it at the factory paint booth? It's possible. Or was it painted? I don't know. There's only one little blemish over here. If we follow, this door's got 10 right here, 8.5 over here, 7 here, 5.5 here, 7.5, 8, 9, 8.5. So is something painted down in this area? Again, we're going to look for some blemishes over here. Yeah, there is a blemish in the paint right here. If the factory noticed a blemish that was big enough, they would go repaint just a section of the door, and that's what this could be. I'm getting from 10 to 8 right just in this little section, which is kind of a big variance. But across the whole door, I'm getting from 6 to 8. 7.5, pretty solid 7.5 on this door all the way across, except for when you get right into here. Sometimes the further back you stand, the more you can see. There is a blemish. If you stand about 5 feet back, you can see it right here, and it's almost like a door ding. And then possibly somebody painted over it. But I'll tell you, I mean, if somebody did, they did a really good job of covering it up. I'm having a really hard time saying that this car was repainted. Even though I'm getting all these weird numbers, these weird and wild numbers are kind of all over this car, I'm not seeing any large variance across quarter panels. The paint quality was not the greatest in these cars. It's kind of a normal thing. I'm gonna say the paint's probably factory original, unless they want us to really gut this car. If somebody said, hey, take this car apart and tell me it was really painted, then we would, you know, take door panels off, take the convertible top off, look down inside. You know, we took the front carpet off because that's easy to access. But to get into the paint underneath the rest of it, I mean, you're talking about taking the body panels off and all that. The car only has 15,000 miles on it. It certainly doesn't look from the eye that it's been repainted. You know, you could tell, sometimes you can walk up to a car and just walk up 5 feet away and say, oh, that car's been painted, you could tell. This car doesn't have that appearance. It's very shiny. I don't think this car was repainted. I don't think so. But, you know, unless somebody proves otherwise. So let's check out the bottom of the car. Let's go to the engine. So the bottom of this car is very nice. What we want to look for in a 15,000 mile car, this car still has all the yellow cosmoline that's still on it. It's still all here, and it's still all yellow with like a little bit of black, you know, road grime here, right? But you can see how the yellow kind of stands out, right? That is a very good indicator that this car is a low mile car. Even on this plastic ducting that ducts the brakes, you can see there's cosmoline that's still on here. You can still barely make out the color. Even on this side, it's still yellow. This is the kind of stuff that you normally don't ever get to see. You don't get to see cosmoline like this because once they get some miles on them, all that goes away. Or if it doesn't go away, it all turns black and you can't see any yellow tinge. We're gonna go ahead and remove this lower panel because I see some wetness seeping out here. And I want to go ahead and inspect the rack and pinion, the fuel tank is underneath here, fuel lines, all that. We're going to look at that. Coming right on down here, we're just going to be looking for the same cosmoline. Now, there's no cosmoline underneath here because they put a rubberized coating underneath here. But you can see how the rubberized coating is still very clean. So this is where the buck stops on a really low mile car. We can see, I've got all the engine and transmission panels removed on this now. We're looking for cosmoline again on this car. So you can see even out here in the dirtiest area where the CV joint is, we have cosmoline on the actual shock, the strut. All right, it should be just like a green strut, but see how there's cosmoline on it? Same thing over here, and it still has a yellow tinge. It is starting to brown, but it's still yellowish. Now, if you come over here on the engine, the engine does have some oil leaks, but you can see the yellow cosmoline all through the engine case. Very nice. Even on the heater boxes right here, you've got the cosmoline still right here as well. And then if we keep on walking towards the front of the car to the transmission, we have factory cosmoline all on the piping, the AC piping, heater piping, the transmission itself all has cosmoline on it. See the brake pipes up there? They have cosmoline on them still. You can see how cosmoline was sprayed heavy right here, and then also heavy over here. So it's a nice yellow tinge. That's what you're looking for. That stuff's 20 years old. This stuff's either usually on the engine, It's usually all washed off by now because these things have so many oil leaks. So just the oil will wash it off. What I'd recommend is if you ever have a car that looks like this underneath, do not steam clean it, don't pressure wash it, don't do anything, because to get that same look back, you won't be able to get this look back on that case again, ever. To switch gears here, timing covers, the timing chain covers and the timing chain boxes are leaking. You can see here's the timing chain box right here. It's kind of hard to see. The O2 sensor's got oil dripping off of it, so here's the box. It bolts up to the side of the case right here. The timing cover is on the rear facing edge of this over here. It's got some leaks also. And that is on the driver's side, or the passenger side. The driver's side over here, you can see oil is coming out from way up there. It's dripping down off here, coming down to this timing chain box area. Now the timing chain box gasket on this one looks better. There's definitely oil leaking from way up high, way back there. Possibly a valve cover gasket, the upper valve cover gasket. This is so cool too. If you look from right here, the lower valve cover right there, so this is the valve cover. This is the lower set of spark plugs right here. See the cosmoline that's on that ignition wire? So that's the factory ignition wire, still with that cosmoline protective spray that's still on it. Really cool. You can see how it's like fading off. This is also very special underneath here under the front. We've removed the lower panel and you can see all this factory cosmoline underneath here. The brake booster right here, the brake master cylinder, all that is all just full of all this cosmoline. Very, very special thing to get to look at. Not very many cars have this. So does the car have 15,000 miles on it? Based on how much cosmoline is still intact, yes, absolutely. And is still colorful? Absolutely it does. Is it painted or not? That's, who knows. So there was some wetness that came out of here. Like, see how this is bleeding out? I don't see anything leaking from here onto here. This is the tunnel where the the drive shaft goes through, and the front differential would be mounted here if it was a Carrera 4. Right now we're inspecting the upper valve covers for leakage. The upper valve cover on this side looks pretty dry. The valve cover on this side, remember we saw some seepage coming down from way up high over here. It is slightly damp. We just got done inspecting the paint on this car, inspecting for any sort of oil leaks on this car. These are the kinds of things that low mile cars need lots of inspection on, because if there's an oil leak, you want to know where the oil leak is on such a low mile car. And the same thing with the paint, it's like, why do you have different numbers? There's different numbers, here and there all over this car, but I don't see anywhere where the car has been actually resprayed in a section. I don't see that happening. From close up or from a distance, the paint on this car looks very, very good. We'll test drive it, verify that it runs and drives and shifts well, the clutch actuates well. The cosmoline finish on the bottom of the car, oil leaks that can come out of the bottom of these cars, and then just a walk around of the paint with all the different paint meter readings and what all that means. A single number doesn't mean anything. If somebody says that you have 8, if the number's 8 on the side of a door, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's been repainted. It means that it possibly was repainted. If the owner wants us to go further into it, we can go pretty crazy on pulling the interior out of the car, taking the convertible top off, really removing the trim from this car and seeing if it's been wrecked or smashed or damaged. As far as the suspension goes, the answer is no, that didn't happen, because it's all factory suspension underneath there. Everything still has cosmoline on it. So I know the car wasn't in a big enough accident to have the suspension crushed. but that doesn't mean anything. You can still scrape the side of the car and have the whole side of the car that needed to be painted. But right now, I'm going to say the car was not painted. The possibility of maybe having the car torn down more to inspect it further, that's only if the owner or the new potential owner wants us to do that. But these are just some of the things to look for.